Home inspections are one of the most important parts of buying a home, but what inspections you should get and whether or not you should get a home inspection at all varies from state to state. Here in North Carolina, I always recommend that my buyers get home inspections, and actually I recommend a whole suite of them. So today, I'm going to talk you through what inspections I recommend when buying in and around Raleigh, North Carolina. But before we dive in, my name is Matt Martin, and I'm a Raleigh-based realtor. I've helped tons of clients, just like you, relocate to the Triangle region of North Carolina, and if you're looking to do the same, I'd love to help you too. First things first, a question I hear all the time from buyers is, do I even need to get a home inspection, or will I need to waive my home inspection to make my offer competitive? The answers to those are absolutely, you should get a home inspection, and no, you should never waive your home inspections here in North Carolina. To understand why, I need to take a quick detour and talk quickly about one of the strangest parts of buying in North Carolina, and that's the due diligence fee. Now, I'm going to potentially oversimplify this, but in most other states, buyers have an inspection period during which they can walk away from the deal without losing any of their earnest money deposit. In competitive situations, buyers will waive this inspection period as a way of strengthening their offer, since waiving inspections essentially makes their deposit money non-refundable from day one. Now, here in North Carolina, we have that same earnest money deposit, which is refundable during your due diligence period. But, and this is a big but, we also have what's called a due diligence fee, which is a non-refundable fee paid upon contract acceptance directly to the seller and credited back to the buyer at closing. This is essentially a fee you're paying to access your due diligence period, which is when you as a buyer should be conducting your inspections. And since this fee is non-refundable from day one, it means the seller is guaranteed money no matter what happens. So waiving your inspection period doesn't really make your offer any more enticing to a seller. It's a little ironic. In a lot of ways, the due diligence fee is incredibly unfair to buyers, but it also protects the buyers by creating this system where you don't have to waive important things like inspections to make your offer competitive. So you should never waive inspections here in North Carolina. Now, this was the total Cliff's Notes version of the due diligence fee, since today's video is all about inspections. So I'd recommend checking out my video here for a deeper dive into this super important topic. So now that you know you should always get a home inspection, let's talk about which inspections I recommend. The first is always a general home inspection. A home inspection will generally take about 2 to 3 hours, and the price will range from $500 to $1,000 based on the size and age of the house. The home inspection covers all the major components of a house: plumbing, electrical, HVAC, which is your heating and cooling, structural, and cosmetic. The inspector's job is to poke and prod all around, from the crawl space up to the attic, and from the exterior foundation up to the roof, and to make sure everything is working as expected. They'll note the ages and general condition of your mechanicals. They'll make sure your water gets hot, your toilets don't leak, your outlets are functional, the garage door opens properly, and that there isn't standing water against the foundation, down in the crawl space, or bats are in your attic. And yes, these are all things my inspectors have found in my own buyers' homes. I could make a whole list of things they do, but that would literally take up the whole video. They'll then issue a home inspection report, and because they're so thorough, this will typically be anywhere from 25 to 75 pages long. And I always warn my buyers about this beforehand, because if you get a 30-page report back without expecting it, you may think your home is falling apart, but just know that a report that long is totally normal. I also always recommend that my buyers attend at least the latter part of the inspection so they can see any issues firsthand and hear the inspector's take. The inspector has to be really dry and technical in their reports, which can often be more daunting than hearing it from them in person, where they can add more color or context. Now, it's important to know the limitations of a home inspector. First off, they won't check certain appliances, particularly the washing machine, dryer, and refrigerator, but they will test the built-in appliances like the oven, hood vent, and dishwasher. They're also typically not licensed specialists in plumbing, electrical, or structural, which is super important to understand. So, for example, a home inspector will go down into your crawl space and look at the foundation and floor joist system, and they will note any areas that may look amiss, but they are not licensed structural engineers and will therefore not write a report certifying the structural integrity of a home. Or a really big one is when it comes to your HVAC system. The inspector will turn it on, they'll make sure it's spitting out hot and cold air, and that it's not actively leaking. But that's about it. They don't test the dampers in a multi-zone system, they don't test the refrigerant levels or pressure in the lines, and they typically won't unscrew any covers to examine the wiring or mechanicals. For that, you'll need a separate HVAC inspector, which is the perfect segue into my next recommendation. I always recommend a separate HVAC inspection from a licensed HVAC technician, regardless of the age of the system. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 instances where the HVAC had only been a few years old, tested fine in the general home inspector's high-level tests, but had deeper underlying issues that would have been detected with a more thorough HVAC inspection. In one, the damper motors weren't working properly, which meant that even when you turned off the upstairs thermostat, air still flowed out of the registers. Then in another, there was a refrigerant leak that wasn't detected during the home inspection since it was a cool day. But when we arrived at our final walkthrough on a hot 90-degree July day, it was very obvious. In both of these cases, we had to call out emergency techs and delay the closing until the next day to get them resolved. And surprisingly, both of these homes were only a few years old, so I always recommend the separate HVAC inspection, which typically runs about $100 to $150 per system. Then, once you're in your home, I recommend getting set up with an HVAC company for biannual maintenance to ensure things stay clean and operable. The last thing you want to do is turn on your AC on that first hot day of the year, only to find out that the capacitor has gone out or you're low on refrigerant. The next major inspection I always recommend is for radon. Radon is a colorless, odorless gas that comes from the breakdown of rock in the soil, and it's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the US. And the Triangle region of North Carolina has a lot of rock, so radon is something we have to think about here. A radon test is super simple. Your home inspector will typically charge about $150 extra to place a measuring device in the home that registers radon levels over a 48 to 72 hour period. It's important to measure over this long of a time frame, as radon levels can fluctuate drastically based on temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. Typically, radon levels will be higher during storms, which is important to keep in mind before performing your radon test. In the US, radon levels above 4.0 are considered dangerous and should be mitigated. And mitigation is simple and not terribly cost prohibitive. You're usually looking at under $2,000, and it involves either installing a pipe under your slab or along the floor of your crawl space that's connected to a fan that sucks the radon out of the air and pipes it up through an exhaust tube that runs outside your house up to about your roof level. I've had multiple instances of radon reports coming back high, and you'll find that most sellers are reasonable with negotiating either a credit at closing for the buyer to have a radon mitigation system installed, or agreeing to mitigate it themselves prior to closing. Okay. The last inspection I recommend for my buyers is a termite inspection. In researching for this video, I found that Alaska is the only state in the US where termites aren't present, so if you've bought anywhere else in the country, you're probably already familiar with termite inspections. Many home inspectors are also licensed to do termite inspections, so they can be performed at the same time as your regular home inspection, and they'll typically run about $75 to $100. While a general home inspection should catch signs of obvious termite infestations, a specific termite inspection will involve a bit more poking and prodding and comes with an official WDIR. That's Wood Destroying Insects report. Now, I said should catch, but I heard a story recently where the home inspector, and Side note, this was not my inspector nor my buyer. They did their whole home inspection and didn't make any mention of termites. The buyer later decided they wanted to have a proper termite inspection, and when that inspector went into the crawl space, they found multiple very obvious signs of termite infestation from a colony that they believed had been active for the last 3 to 5 years. So I always tell my buyers to get the specialized termite inspection, since the inspector needing to sign off on that WDIR will require them to be as thorough as possible. Now, it's very common here in North Carolina for inspectors to see signs of past termite treatment, which can include anything from bait stations around the perimeter of the property to holes drilled into the slab or foundation wall to allow for application of treatment. Then, once you're in your home, I suggest getting an annual termite inspection to ensure things are nice and clean around your property. So those are the 4 inspections I always recommend to my clients, but there are a few others that may arise depending on the specific home you're buying. If the home is on a septic system, then I'd absolutely recommend a septic inspection to check for leaks, cracks, or if the tank is near full. If you're on a well, you may want to consider a water quality test. If you're buying an older home that has a lot of trees around, you may want to bring in a plumber to scope your waistline and ensure it's fully intact and hasn't been compromised by tree roots. And if your general home inspection reveals any potential things that require specialists to come in, then it's important to bring in those inspectors to give you more insight. That can mean bringing in a structural engineer to evaluate the integrity of the home, an electrician to examine the wiring, or a plumber to determine the extent of a leak. So, once you've done all your inspections here in North Carolina, you may be wondering what the seller has to address. And unfortunately, I don't have great news for you. North Carolina is a caveat emptor or buyer beware state. So unless repairs have been agreed to as part of the contract, all homes are sold as is. That means that sellers aren't required to make any repairs. Now, that sounds scary, but if you discover something big enough during your inspections that you're considering walking away from the deal and that due diligence fee that we discussed earlier, it's probably big enough the seller would have to disclose it to future buyers. And a home falling out of contract often makes it harder to sell. So most sellers are incentivized to work with buyers to reach some kind of agreement. That usually comes in the form of closing cost credits for the buyers to make the repairs themselves after closing. So that's a quick overview of the inspection process here in North Carolina. When you're making one of the biggest financial decisions of your life, it's super important to know what you're buying before signing on that dotted line. And inspections are an important part of that due diligence. If you're ready to kick off your home hunt here in the Triangle region of North Carolina, I'd love to be your guide. You can reach me by phone, email, or text, and you can find all my contact information in the link below or by scanning this QR code right here with your phone. And if you like this video, I have a whole catalog of others all about moving to, living in, and buying real estate in and around Raleigh, North Carolina. Here's another one here that you may like, so give it a click to keep on watching.